Happy New Year, Christian. Welcome.
Happy New Year.
Have you had a chance to look around the show and take it all in?
I haven't, I'm afraid. I've only walked from Hall 18.
You're a busy
to
guy,
here,
aren't you?
so,
You've just run in. Let's reflect on what was a sensational year for Red Bull Racing before we look ahead. You won the last 3 races of the year. Undoubtedly, RB5 was the fastest car on the grid. You must be very pleased with the overall effort.
You know, I think 2009 was a big year for Red Bull, and we had a great year. We won 6 races. We challenged in both championships until very late on, and it was an interesting year because it was a massive regulation change going into the season, and then some controversy over the regulations as to what was permitted, what wasn't in terms of diffusers. I certainly learned more about diffusers in the run-up to the season than I had knowledge of previously. But it was a great year. I think it was great for Formula One to have 2 new teams running at the front, we're looking to build on that momentum that we carried through the season, finishing the season on a real high, as we set off into 2010.
Is there an element of frustration that Jenson Button and Brawn were able to skip away in those first 6 or 7 races because of the diffuser situation? Had there been parity at the beginning and it had been more clear, you'd have been there, wouldn't you?
Yes, but I mean, they exploited a regulation or a sort of a greyness within the regulation that was then given clarity, after the appeal, and they made hay while the sun shone. And obviously, Jenson did a great job exploiting the performance out of the car in that first third of the year, which really set him up, very well. And then his consistency was quite remarkable. Even obviously at races where he wasn't competitive, he was still picking up 5th, 6th, 7th places and continuing to add to his score sheet. So his campaign got off to a very aggressive start at the beginning, and then we didn't see him on the podium, I think, between Turkey and Abu Dhabi. But obviously collecting those points, served him very, very well.
How do you assess the relative performances of your 2 drivers, Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber? Sebastian won 4 races, almost won the championship. Mark had a breakthrough win at the Nürburgring and won again in Brazil. Just analyse each man's performance over the year and what they've got to do now.
Well, we're very fortunate that we've got a great balance of youth and experience, and I think that Sebastian has demonstrated that he's a real talent. He's grown and matured and improved throughout the 2009 season. It was a great campaign for him to win 4 Grand Prix, and just witnessing how he developed was very impressive. He had some hugely impressive drives in Japan, in Abu Dhabi, and even in Brazil that went largely unnoticed from a lowly grid position. Obviously Silverstone as well, and he's a young guy. He's very intelligent, mentally very strong, and a very likable character. So he's a very popular member within the team. He's got a great sense of humour, and has a very strong working relationship with Mark. And one mustn't forget that the difficulties that Mark had 12 months ago when he had a very nasty accident, badly breaking his leg, and also he forgot to mention that he'd broken his shoulder blade as well. So his recuperation over the winter was quite phenomenal, and it was really took him, I think, 2 or 3 races to get back up to full speed. And it was great to see him win his first Grand Prix in Germany, and obviously the motion that he had after crossing the line.
Even with a drive-through.
Even with a drive-through.
Without that, he'd have won by weeks.
I mean, effectively did a 3-stop. But he was very, very quick that day, and don't think anything was going to stop him from winning that Grand Prix. So it was great to see him, finally break his duck. And the 2 of them work very well as a combination. And we're very fortunate within Red Bull that we've got 2 drivers with a very strong work ethic. They're both very quick and complement each other very well.
One of the significant things, I'm assuming, is that you are the only top team keeping the same 2 drivers for 2010. Continuity crucial?
For us, we believe it is crucial. I think not just with the drivers, but across the board with with personnel and all aspects of the car, including the engine. So we are probably one of the big teams that hasn't had a change, and there's always that settling down period, especially with the restricted testing, that drivers that have changed teams or new drivers coming into teams are going to be under pressure to get up to speed quickly, whereas we have the benefit of continuity, and that does have a benefit, but obviously the other teams are quality teams and world-class drivers, and I'm sure by the time we arrive in Bahrain, they'll all be in good shape.
Clearly, you've taken a very long-term view with Sebastian Vettel. He is undoubtedly a superstar of the future. What does Mark have to do in 2010? I know he's only on a single-year deal. What does he need to do to stay with you guys?
He needs to do what he did in 2009, and his motivation is very high. He's training very hard. He's now back at full fitness. He had his last operation to remove some screws from his leg, which gives him full movement of his right leg now. So he's training very hard. His motivation is high, and I think it's going to be interesting with the qualifying changing as well, slightly in the third element now being sort of a flat-out Q3 without the fuel effect. Will probably suit him quite well as well. So I'm sure he'll be very competitive this season.
He was lucky that it was his right leg, wasn't it? Because in a modern Grand Prix car, you brake with your left leg, and you push the brake pedal harder than you push the throttle. If it had been the other way around, it might have been tricky.
He would have been in a lot of trouble. I mean, this time 12 months ago, he couldn't bear weight on his right leg, and he was actually very concerned because before he drove the car, he went and did some running in a go-kart just to make sure that the feel and the movement was in the leg, and he focused so hard on the throttle movement going that way that actually when he drove the car, what he found difficult was that I think that the tendons had stiffened up, that he found it hard to come off the throttle. But there was the look of relief in his eyes after he completed his first couple of laps, that everything was working and the feel was very much still there. You could see the relief, written all over his face, having completed his first run.
In terms of your driver lineup and looking ahead, what do you think about somebody like Kimi Räikkönen, who we know is Red Bull backed? He's going rallying. He may well be available in 12 months' time. Regardless of how well Sebastian and Mark do, Kimi Räikkönen would be a big coup for Red Bull Racing in Formula One, wouldn't he?
I think Kimi has pledged his future to rallying. His heart seems to be firmly set on rallying. He's going about his campaign and preparation for his rally campaign this year, and it's going to be fascinating to see how he performs in that arena. Certainly going the other way when we tested Sebastian Loeb at Barcelona at the end of 2008, he acquitted himself very, very well. So it's going to be interesting to see, how Kimi performs, but I think his focus is fully on rallying, and our focus is obviously very much on our current drivers for the 2010 season.
Kimi's one of those guys whose head will drop if it's not going quite well, and you don't get that feeling with Sebastian Vettel, Mark Webber. Their glasses are half full, aren't they? They are head up, focused, driven guys. They promote the brand very well.
Well, that's, I think, one of the most impressive things about Sebastian during last year. He never, ever gave up, and nobody was more disappointed than him in Brazil. That he never believed or gave up belief that he could win the championship, and no matter what the adversity was with the engine failures that he had to deal with last year, he kept fighting, and he's a very positive force, and I think that stands him in great stead, and he's a fierce competitor, and also Mark as well, as he demonstrated with the recovery from his accident.